August 1942, a meeting of senior officers is held and they discuss the Italian successes at both Suda Bay in March of 1941, where HMS York was crippled and the tanker Pericles was sunk. Also in December of 1941, at Alexandria, HMS Valiant and HMS Queen Elizabeth were damaged. The Prime Minister Winston Churchill, seeing the advantages of this type of warfare, is now keen to start a similar unit. The name of Major Herbert Hassler is mentioned. Nicknamed Blondie because of his moustache. In early 1941, aged 28, Hassler submitted a paper to the Admiralty on the idea of attacking enemy ships in harbors using collapsible canoes, known as folbots. Similar ideas were already being pioneered by Special Forces officers, like Captain Roger Courtney, who had set up the Special Boat Section to carry out canoe raids and reconnaissance. Major Hassler is summoned to a meeting. The Royal Marine Beach Patrol Department is born, later to become the Royal Marine Boom Patrol Detachment. This title allows them to train without any suspicions. All Hassler needed now was men. He visited a small arms course at Gosport, where he asked for volunteers for arduous training and dangerous missions. Eventually his force grew to 24 men. They were initially trained using folbots, small folding boats made of canvas, but these were soon found to be unsuitable for launching in rough water or being lifted into a mother craft or submarine. They were replaced by Mark II semi-rigid, 2, and 3-man collapsible canoes. They were trained in the use of limpet mines, long-distance paddling, night navigation, and escape and evasion. Training was to last 4 months and took place at a few locations. Lumps fought at South Sea, from which they would paddle to the Isle of Wight. They also trained at Portsmouth and Holy Loch, Scotland. They also undertook nighttime training along the Thames. Targets for Major Hassler's Cockleshell were picked out by British intelligence officers reading signals transmitted from the Japanese embassy in Berlin to Tokyo. The targets were to be German merchant ships running the British blockade and carrying rubber and raw materials to the Third Reich, as well as other vessels hauling special manufacturing equipment to Japan. The ships all started from the Bordeaux-Bassins docks, about 75 miles up the River Gironde in southwestern France. An attack by British commandos had been ruled out as too costly an effort and investment. The area was defended by an estimated 20,000 German troops, and could not be bombed because of the high number of civilian casualties which would result. Hassler's force was given their first mission, Operation Frankton. The plan was to be taken by submarine from Holy Loch in Scotland, and dropped 9 miles off the French coast. They would paddle the 75 miles to Bordeaux, moving during the night and laying up during the day. The river was patrolled by a significant number of Kriegsmarine patrol boats. Upon completion of the mission, the crews were to make their way to Ruffolk, where they would make contact with a French resistance escape line, who would take them to Spain. Louis Mountbatten, the Sea Lord, gives the mission the green light, but changes the number of canoes to 6, and tells Hassler he is not allowed to go, as he is a valued instructor. Hassler gives reasons why he should be included in the mission and is finally allowed to go. The force now consists of 6 boats. Hay Division. Major Hassler and Marine Bill Sparks, in kayak Catfish. Corporal Albert Laver and Marine William Mills, in kayak Crayfish. Corporal George Sheard and Marine David Moffat, in kayak Conger. B Division. Lieutenant John Mackinnon and Marine James Conway, in kayak Cuttlefish. Sergeant Samuel Wallace and Marine Robert Ewart, in kayak Coalfish. Marine W.A. Ellery and Marine E. Fisher, in kayak Cachalot. Marine Norman Colley was taken as a reserve, but never required. They board HMS Tuna and set off on their mission from Holy Loch on the 30th of November, 1942. Robert, Bobby Ewart celebrated his 21st birthday on HMS Tuna. A lad from Glasgow, he had fallen for a 16-year-old girl from South Sea, called Heather Powell. On Tuna he wrote a last letter to her. Dear Heather, I trust it won't be necessary to have this sent to you, but since I don't know the outcome of this little adventure, I thought I'd leave this note behind. I couldn't help but love you, Heather, although you were so young. I will always love you, as I know you do me. That alone should get me through this, but one never knows the turns of fate. One thing I ask of you, Heather, is not to take it too hard. You have yet your life to live. Think of me as a good friend and keep your chin up. Some lucky fellow will find you who has more sense than I had and who can get you what you deserve. You are young yet for this sort of thing, but I had to do it, so please don't worry and upset yourself about me. With your picture in front of me, I feel confident that I shall pull through and get back to you someday. I won't have you read more, Heather, but I will thank you for all you have done. I pray that God will spare me and save you from this misery, so hoping for a speedy reunion. I'll say cheerio and God be with you. Thanking you and your mother from the bottom of my heart. God bless and keep you all. Yours forever, Bob, chin up sweetheart. On the 7th of December, they arrive at the drop-off point in darkness and at 2000 begin unloading their canoes. Cachalot is damaged and the two Marines, Ellery and Fisher, have to stay aboard the submarine. Fisher broke down and wept. The crews are wished luck and the submarine dives and disappears, leaving them alone in the darkness. They are 9 miles from the lighthouse. As they begin their journey up the river, they encounter a tide race. Conger with Corporal Sheard and Marine Moffat capsizes and is towed by Hassler for some time until they are within a mile of the shore. Hassler has to leave them or jeopardize the mission. Corporal Sheard and Marine Moffat were not drowned, but died of exposure to the cold. The body of Marine Moffat was found on the Isle de Ré on the 14th of December by a local teenager, but Corporal Sheard's body is believed to have been washed further upstream and recovered and buried in an unknown place further up the coastline. Coalfish, with Sergeant Wallace, and Marine Ewart failed to negotiate the tide race on the first attempt, and was never seen again. It was learned later that Sergeant Wallace and Marine Ewart actually paddled through the tide race on that first night but were swept inshore and capsized in surf. While still in uniform, they were captured at daybreak on December 8 by German soldiers from a flak battery. After several days of interrogation, during which they refused to reveal their objective, they were shot in Bordeaux early on December 11. Ewart was informed of his execution hours before it took place. According to a German report, Sergeant Wallace comforted and encouraged the young Marine as they were driven to the firing squad. Heather was never told the exact circumstances of her lover's death, but it was clear from those who returned from Frankton that he would not come back. She contracted tuberculosis and, her heart broken, died just before her 17th birthday. Despite their losses, the 3 remaining kayaks carried on, the Marines paddling over 20 miles in 5 hours. Upon reaching St. Vivien du Médoc, a town along the estuary, the 3 kayaks and their crew each took shelter during the day. Cuttlefish, with Lieutenant Mackinnon and Marine Conway, became separated. They pressed on for 3 nights, until Cuttlefish was sunk by an underwater obstacle. Lieutenant Mackinnon also injured his leg. The 2 men swam ashore and made contact with the resistance. They managed to evade capture for 4 days, but they were finally betrayed and arrested by the Vichy Gendarmerie, who handed them over to the Germans at La Rioli Hospital 30 miles southeast of Bordeaux, while attempting to make their way to the Spanish border. Mackinnon had been admitted to the hospital for treatment for an infected knee. The 2 men were handed over to the Gestapo, but never betrayed their mission or their comrades. Catfish and Crayfish, meanwhile, spent the daylight hours of December 8 in a hide under camouflage nets. They slept in their canoes and were visited by friendly Frenchmen. That night, after spending 3.5 hours hauling their fully loaded canoes across almost a mile of sandy mud, the 2 weary crews started paddling again up the River Gironde. The weather turned colder, freezing the spray on the cockpit covers and numbing the Marines' hands and fingers. They covered 22 miles in 6 hours that night. On December 9, Major Hassler's canoeists lay up for the day in a hide. That night, the 2 canoes traveled 15 nautical miles. By dawn on December 10, the Cocklemen were still too far away to find a makeshift base from which they could attack the enemy ships. By 6:45 p.m., the resolute paddlers had covered only 9 miles because of the thrust of an ebbing tide, so Hassler decided to change the plan of attack from that evening to the night of December 11. This entailed another 20 miles of paddling to the objective. Drifting with the flood tide after the moon had set, Hassler and Sparks in Catfish attached 3 limpet mines to the hull of a 7,000-ton cargo ship, 2 on a mine-laying destroyer, 2 on a smaller merchant vessel, and 1 on a tanker. As Hassler and Sparks drifted, a German sentry swung the beam of his torch on them, holding it steady for what seemed like an eternity until the tide floated catfish behind another ship. Perhaps thinking that the canoe was a floating log, the sentry switched off his light and turned away. Since leaving HMS Tuna, the surviving Cockleshell had paddled 91 miles. After scuttling their kayaks, the two crews wished each other good luck and set off separately for Spain. 2 days into their journey, Marines Laver and Mills were apprehended at Montelulagard by French gendarmes. Betrayed, the Marines were handed over to German authorities. Major Hassler and Marine Sparks made their way to Suffolk on December the 18th. There, Hassler and Sparks are contacted by a female from the French resistance, Mary Lindell, who takes them to Spain. She mentions that the resistance had a plan to destroy the ships by smuggling in explosives in the coal. However, due to the mission by the Marines, it has now been cancelled. A remarkable woman, Mary Lindell had been a frontline nurse in the First World War and spent the Second World War running escape lines in the south of France. In March 1943, they were guided across the Pyrenees into neutral Spain and onto the British consulate in Barcelona. Major Hassler was flown to England and arrived on the afternoon of April 1st. Blondie Hassler would live on until 1987 and Bill Sparks until 2002. Admiral Louis Mountbatten described the raid as the most courageous and imaginative of all the raids ever carried out by the men of Combined Operations.